Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon as we dive into some wonderful content that I'm excited to share with you from a dynamic group of experts here about spotlighting student experience in theater and dance spaces. Millikin University is a nationally recognized program and has been for decades. And if anybody is an expert in putting students first, I promise you, it is Millikin and their theater and dance department. And so I'm really excited to introduce you to this group of folks, and especially Mary Black, who is their director, to go through the Center for Theater and Dance at Millikin University and look at some show-stopping spaces. I'm Jessica Whitlock. I'm going to serve as moderator today, and just a couple of items housekeeping-wise as we kick things off, and then I'll get out of the way. If you have questions, we're excited to talk through those at the end, and just ask that you submit those through the chat window as opposed to the Q&A. So your questions, type them in anytime during the webinar in that chat window, and I'll collect those, and then we'll, at the end of our time together, distribute those to your panelists. Speaking of panelists, I'm going to let them all introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Mary Black. I am the director of the School of Theater and Dance here at Millikin University. Millikin University is a small private liberal arts school located in Decatur, Illinois, right in the heart of Illinois. And one of the things we're most known for is our arts programs, specifically our theater and musical theater programs.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carson Durham. I'm a principal with BLDD Architects. I was the lead designer on this particular project. You know, for the last 25 years, I've had the blessing to work with these wonderful people on this panel over those years working on these types of projects, but also been blessed to create spaces for students to thrive and introduce creativity to their lives in terms of the way that they can expand their craft and their experience in learning environments.
Hi, I'm Tony Foreman with Next Stage Design. I'm one of the co-founders of Next Stage Design, and we've been around for a little while, but my partner and I have over 40 years of experience in designing and equipping theater and performing arts spaces internationally as well as this country, and we do a lot of university and college work, and I'm delighted to be here today with you.
Scott Pfeiffer, I'm a partner with Threshold Acoustics in Chicago. We do audio and video systems and acoustics, and we know where the mute button is. We have 30 consultants here in Chicago, and 85% of our work is in public assembly spaces. So we like to work with making it easy for people to be on a stage and be heard.
And I'm Jessica Whitlock with BLDD Architects. I'm a senior associate here. And fun fact, actually, in my former life, I was actually a musical theater major at Millikin, realized that there were people far more talented than I was and found a different career path. But I'm really excited to see this project come full circle with Millikin.
All right, so I want to start by talking about how this project kind of got started. Our School of Theater and Dance has been growing significantly over the last 10 years or so. And program enrollment has grown and faculty has grown, our spaces have not. And so we've been really adapting to perhaps not ideal situations. We've kind of repurposed spaces in other buildings to make new spaces for our program. And that was just no longer feasible, and also doesn't allow the opportunities for our program to continue to grow. So through a great deal of university investment, we were able to make a plan for this new Center for Theater and Dance, which really prioritizes the student experience and really created room for us to continue to grow in enrollment and in the excellence of our teaching and learning here at Millikin.
Thank you, Mary. We're going to talk about 4 particular areas of the building or subjects for the building. We're first going to talk a little bit about movement. We're going to walk through some of the features and some of the exciting things that are happening in the studio spaces. We're going to look at design and production and how those spaces have begin to help students in those particular areas. Certainly, we're going to talk about performance. That we're going to talk a little bit about this wonderful theater that is there for students to really explore their craft in many, many different ways. And then ultimately, we're going to talk about connection. This building does allow for lots of connections for both the introvert and the extrovert. So we're going to talk about those spaces and how they respond to student needs as well. And so Mary's going to first start talking about movement in our studio spaces.
All right, so we're going to start by looking at our dance studios, and specifically we have a large dance studio on the 3rd floor that overlooks the quad. We'll see an exterior view of this space in a little bit. But our dance studios, we're a school of theater and dance. So these dance studios really needed to be multifunctional. We teach ballet, jazz, modern, tap, theater dance, hip hop, you name it in these spaces. So we needed floors that were multifunctional and would work for both ballet and for tap. We also needed the studios to all be multifunctional, not only as dance studios during the day for a variety of different styles of dance classes, but also to serve as rehearsal studios at night. So in addition to this building, we have a large roadhouse theater that brings tourists into Decatur. And so we use that theater for our large musical every year. And that theater is particularly large. For those of you theater geeks in the house, it has a 60-foot wide proscenium. So we've always struggled with having a rehearsal space that was big enough to actually stage our musicals. And so this dance studio fulfills that need for us. So here we've got a 360-degree view of this dance studio. My favorite part is the view. So you can see it overlooks the majority of campus here, looking directly down on the quad. You'll see the permanent ballet bars along the window wall. And then as we scroll past, you'll also see a series of portable ballet bars that we're able to bring out into the center for bar work at the beginning of ballet classes. You'll notice that it has mirrors on 3 walls, but also that there are all those black drapes in the corner so that you can cover up all of those mirrors for the situations where you don't want the performers watching themselves in the mirrors anymore, as they're supposed to have learned the choreography and no longer need to watch themselves. You'll actually, another small feature here, you'll actually see that the doors into the space are also mirrored to help provide a seamless mirror space for the performers and the dancers.
So one of the things that Mary mentioned is that the idea of visibilities. It is sort of risky, honestly, to put a large dance studio on the 3rd level of a building like this, but it accomplished really 2 things for us. It gave that great visibility and that great presence on the campus, but it also allowed for people to look at these spaces from the ground level and have the dancers not feel like they're being sort of gawked at all times. So it's about this idea of looking out, but also this transparency into the space so that the larger context of the campus can appreciate what's happening in this building. And I think you'll see that strategy, and we'll mention that strategy throughout the entire conversation here.
One of the challenges of this beautiful room was that it was so beautiful that the president of the university at the time earmarked it as an event space. And I don't know how that conversation is going, but it actually can accommodate many different things, including events. There's a series of pipes on the ceiling for theater lights and portable speakers. There are actually aerial dance strong points in the ceiling so that up to 5 aerialists can rehearse at one time or perform perhaps. So the room is really not just a rehearsal studio, but can be performance or special event. And with that beautiful view, what a great event space that would be. I want to talk just a second about the floors, because being dance studios, and there are several in the space and in the stage as well, we were able to create the same kind of resiliency in the floors for all the studios and the stage. So the performers wouldn't have to adjust when they went from rehearsal to performance in the theater. The top surfaces are different, so that, for instance, some are better for tap than others, but they can all handle it all. And it just might sound a little different for tap. But it's a great opportunity when you have a new building to be able to provide that continuity, and safe, injury-free dance floors are very important.
All right, so I think next we're going to move on and talk a little bit about the acting studios. Acting studios are often not as exciting to look at, because what actors really need as they learn and grow is big open spaces where they can experiment and explore, both physically, as you see in this image, but also vocally. So we offer coursework in voice, for instance, that asks students to explore their vocal extremes, and Scott will talk a little bit about how we accommodated that. But we also wanted to be able to physically move about these spaces. So as Tony mentioned, we included sprung floor not just in our dance studios, but in all of our acting studios, so that it's safe to work and dance and teach combat or movement in any of those types of spaces. I want to point out they're not just acting and rehearsal spaces, they're also, of course, teaching spaces. So some of the small details you'll notice as we look around this larger acting studio. So we've also incorporated small whiteboards and bulletin boards for the instructors to be able to use during classes. And you'll also see a big blue screen in each of these spaces. We included large portable video monitors, so they can be put in any location in the space, depending on how you're using that space for, say, a scene study course. But those have been incredibly valuable to us over this last year, as we're able to now Zoom students into courses when we are trying to teach at low capacity for COVID. So it has been a really excellent space. And this one, it has a floor space that is Marley, just like the dance studios, and one wall of mirrors. So this is the largest acting studio, and we use it for teaching both our movement and combat courses. But there are also a few smaller studios with more traditional masonite floors for an acting studio. And one last thing in the 360 I want to point out, I know Tony's going to mention it, is you'll notice a couple of double doors in the corner of this dance studio as well. And those are the doors to all of the adjacent storage spaces.
Yes, I'm the storage space nerd.
Right, absolutely. So yeah, as Mary mentioned, when you create an acting space, those spaces have to be big for movement, and sometimes that can lead to a room that feels cavernous or is difficult to communicate in. If it gets too dry, you have to put a lot of vocal energy into making sounds, and if it gets too reverberant, then it's distracting and you can't understand each other. So striking the balance in these rooms was all about controlling the background noise, making sure you weren't competing with the mechanical systems or the people acting next door, and then also making the rooms respond just enough so that you knew your voice was getting out there, but not so much that it would be overly reverberant.
So as Mary mentioned, and I started to butt in there about storage, you know, one of the keys to making these rooms really functional for instruction is to be able to do all the different tasks that are called upon them in the course of a given day. So there needs to be a place to put away the acting cubes and doors and tables that acting classes need to hone their craft, and open it up for a movement class. And one of the wonderful things about this, we had such a good rapport with the whole faculty, including the instructor of stage combat. There's actually a separate stage combat storage room for weapons. And obviously you want to keep that secure and organized. And that is just around the corner, just outside that door, in fact. So storage space was extremely important, and we were successful in this project in getting that. And now it's up to Mary and her colleagues to keep it organized.
They're working on it.
It's a work in progress. Yep.
It is always a work in progress. All right, so we're going to move on and talk a little bit about our design and production spaces. This is one of the things we were most interested in as we built new facilities, because it's one of the things we were most lacking. As I mentioned, for acting studios, you really just need big open spaces. But for teaching, design, and production, you need lots of technology. And so that's one of the things we really wanted to feature in this new building. So these first images we're going to see are of our costume production lab. And yes, I said lab. This is not our costume studio. This is a separate space intended specifically for the teaching of costume production classes. And we have those spaces separate so that we don't have to close down the costume shop and the labor working in there when we're teaching class. So you'll notice in this space, as we flip through the images, we've put 16 matching sewing machines in here so that all of our students can be working on the same matching sewing machine, as well as there's a 17th machine up front with the instructor station and a web and a dot cam. So this has been really influential in our ability to teach things like how to thread the sewing machine efficiently, because you can actually zoom in on your own little hands on the machine, showing all of the small parts to all of the students in the room. We also have these amazing black cutting tables in here that have built-in storage. So we have space, again, out of view for all of our students to be able to store their project supplies. Next, I want to talk a little bit about our design lab. So we'll have to scroll back up. Yep. This space was really intended to be multifunctional to teach and learn design and production classes. So we teach our scenic design, costume design courses in here. We teach drawing and painting and rendering in here. So we really wanted this to, again, be a multifunctional space. You'll notice the natural light in both of these spaces, which Carson's going to come back to. But we also have flexible arrangements in here. So we have drawing tables that are able to move around and are also able to tilt for drawing or drafting. But we also have a sink in the back with a paint trap, which is such a little thing, but so important if you want to teach a paint class to not have to take your wet brushes to another space to clean them. We also have adequate storage. So again, we can store both classroom supplies and individual students' project supplies in these spaces. One of my favorite things is that both of these spaces I just talked about also are a few of the spaces in the building that have swipe access. So all of our student IDs can be granted access to these spaces. So we can keep them locked and keep all of the technology secure, but also give students access to these spaces after classroom hours to be able to work on their projects.
A couple of details. Go ahead, Carson. Sorry.
Well, I'm sorry, Tony. You can jump in after me.
Just real quick, wanted to point out, you see these electrical outlets coming from the ceiling. You'll notice the same thing in the costume studio. And the reason for that is we don't want to put electrical outlets in the floor in a costume zone because they'll fill up with pins. And that can really ruin your day. The other thing about this room, which is really terrific, and it's advance of technology these days, these overhead lights that you see, the color temperature and the color rendering of those lights can be adjusted so that as students are working on a project and in the costume studio or production, the light that they're seeing, the fabric colors is the same as it will be on stage. And if that needs to be adjusted, they can adjust that. So that's just a little tweak that we added. Go ahead, Carson.
No problem. Yeah, I mean, these two lab spaces are on very valuable real estate as it relates to this building. They're on a corner, and they were intentionally placed there to give them some visibility, not only from natural light from the outside in, but again, this idea of exposing the program, excuse me, to the sort of the campus at large. It was really important for the design team to be very deliberate about that. So you normally don't necessarily have views into spaces like this in a building of this type, but it was really important to us to put a priority on these spaces and make sure that the students were exposed to the larger context of the campus, and it really made a really big impact on the priority for the space.
I want to add one last tiny little tidbit in this space, because you'll notice in the still images, the dress forms in the back are dressed up in these lovely garments that we wanted to put on them to show off the space. But the 360 view actually is our space this week, and so it's actually being used. And what you see on the dress form up there on the left is the model of the camp shirt that our costume construction students are actually working on their patterns for this week. And you'll notice that the model is there, but all of their supplies for that project are neatly tucked away in their individually labeled drawers in those cutting tables. All right, let's move on down and look at the actual costume studio. This is where our costume production for our main stage season takes place. So again, you'll see a lot of the same features you saw in the costume lab. But we have these same cool cutting tables with the built-in storage, which has been incredible. Lots of different storage locations. I'll point out a few of those as we see them. And then we've built in some really specific spaces for students to learn skills we have had no space to teach before. So an example of that is our new hair and makeup space, which we see here, which features traditional hair, shampoo, and cutting chairs on the left side, but then on the right side, it also features ventilation space so that students can work on wigs. And you see a little bit of our wig and foam head storage there in the back. Next, you're going to see some of the costume storage spaces. So this one is the smallest of the costume storage spaces, and it's right off of the costume studio. So this is all of our small piece storage. This is where all of our hats, shoes, undergarments, t-shirts, small foldable items are located. And these you'll see are all in these blue bins. These have a computer database where you can find everything you need to know. Next, we'll see some of the hanging storage. This is upstairs. We've got 2 hanging storage rooms upstairs. And those are really well organized as we moved our stock over. So you'll see they also all are individually tagged with their sizes, which has been incredible in terms of being able to find the stock you're looking for. And finally, we're going to look at the dye space. This is probably a little bit of a confusing picture to folks. This is our spray booth, and it is something that we were hugely excited about. This space allows crafts artisans to be able to spray paint, spray dye, spray adhesives in the space without breathing those fumes in. So it's got a large hood to evacuate all of that, all of those fumes, which has been incredible and an extra safety option for us. Next, you'll see the other view of that dye space, which has our very first steam jacketed dye vat, which allows us to dye much larger quantities of fabric. So much so that the space is big enough, we'll actually be teaching a full class in here starting in the fall. We'll be teaching a global dye techniques course that will move between the costume studio and the dye space. And then we're going to go down. We'll see the 360 view of the costume studio. And I want you to notice all of the storage again as you move around. You see storage under the windows, and then these fabulous cabinets with whiteboard on the outside so we can keep notes with our historic period Barbie collection displayed up on top. But this end also has all of our specialty machines. And then as we look down the shop, you'll see our traditional home and industrial sewing machines as well.
The equipment in this costume studio is really state of the art, and a lot of that has to do with safety, as Mary mentioned. Back in the craft and dye room, where you have the filtered exhaust hood and the proper kettle for dyeing fabrics, this is all about teaching students the right way to do things with the right tools. There's compressed air available in the costume studio as well as in the craft and dye area for any pneumatic spraying that you may want to do. So I think that the students here now are really going to have at their fingertips, in addition to great instruction, the right tools to do their work. And the storage space, it really can't be overstated how important that is to keep an organized, neat and orderly workspace for safety, as well as just mental well-being, to know that you're working on something that is not happenstance. It's organized, there's a way to do it. And it's just really exciting to see this space now with things in it and things in their places.
I'll just jump in here a little bit. I want you to notice the large windows into the space. That again, it was an intentional act for us to create that. As Tony said, sometimes these spaces can be buried, and so the natural light and being able to view out was really important. And we also created an exterior space that we're going to talk about a little later in terms of performance. So that's what you see outside those windows, and it wasn't an easy thing to accomplish because we are really building a building next to a hill. So we took advantage of that and created this sort of amphitheater approach. So it was a big part of what we're trying to accomplish.
All right, well, that's our first couple of design and production studios. Next, we're going to move down into our sound, lighting, and CAD labs. So this is where we've added a great deal of new technology that we're really excited about. This is our lighting and sound lab. And our next image here is also going to show our computer-aided drafting and design classroom. And I want to talk a little bit about how some of these features work together. But first, we're going to scroll down to that 360 view. We're going to look around a little bit. So our 360 view, I love this image because it really lets you see the space in use. You're going to notice over here on the left side of the space, we have our sound setup. So we've got our sound console as well as the Mac Pro that we're running our QLab setup on. So you can control both sound and all of our projections for any courses from this side. But then if you scroll to the other side, you're going to notice that we have multiple consoles over there. It was important to us that our students have the ability to learn to program lighting for a variety of different brands and manufacturers. There are certain types of consoles you're going to see on Broadway or in regional theater that are different than the consoles you're going to see in rock and roll or in touring. So we wanted to be able to teach on all of those consoles. So all three of these consoles can be hooked up to any of the lighting fixtures in the space. But obviously you can only fit one person in here at each console, which is what makes it very cool that we can work classes with this space and the computer-aided drafting and design classroom upstairs. So that space with all 16 of those iMacs has all of the offline editing software for these computerized consoles. So students can go upstairs, work on their own machines with all 16 people in a classroom and do their programming upstairs, and then bring that work downstairs on a flash drive, plug it into the console, and actually attach it and play back the work they've programmed on the moving lighting in the lighting and sound lab, which has been a really cool opportunity. We're actually offering a programming course this semester that has really been able to use both of those spaces in cool ways.
It's incredibly smart stuff, and I'm sure will only breed smarter students. But the room is tricked out in some more conventional ways too. You'll notice that there's a pipe grid overhead. There's pipes along the walls, both vertical and horizontal. And there's a set of draperies in here that really provide for many different things. There's a blue screen and a green screen drape. There's a scrim, and there are black masking draperies so that students can see the effect of different colored lights on different fabrics. They can do the video work with the green and blue screens. They can learn lighting angles and what that means and how to sculpt a form with light by easily being able to move things around with just a short step ladder. Safety, again, a big concern here. We know that students are going to be working in here at probably early hours of the morning. So don't fight it, go with it, make it safe and possible. So it's a wonderful room, and it's got what they need to really learn and explore in these new medias.
Well, and all that same mounting capability allows them to place loudspeakers where you want to, so that when you do your offline immersive surround mixing, you can experience it in a space without dramatic moves of boxes and heavy things. So yeah, it works for all sides.
And again, that same Q lab that you would run your programming off of down here is also up in the CAD lab. So you could do your programming up there in class and bring your projects down. One other little tidbit I'd like to add about this space, because we've come into this building this year during our unique quarantine situation, this space having a green screen, which we thought someday will maybe grow into doing more video, has become hugely important to us as we have done more and more Zoom and digital productions this year. So this space is also actually located right across from the costume studio. So at the end of costume fittings, we've been bringing our performers over to take their photos in front of the green screen, in front of the digital backgrounds, to ensure that the technology is going to work. So that's been a really exciting opportunity to use this space a little differently than we might have in conventional times. All right, let's go talk about the theater.
Yeah,
Sure.
So we knew when we started talking about our theater building that we were going to want to put a new theater in it. But as I mentioned before, we also have a Roadhouse touring theater that we have access to for 1 or 2 productions a year. And that's a big cavernous proscenium theater with a big counterweight fly system. So we know we didn't need that style of theater. So what we wanted to create for the students was a really flexible space that allowed us to explore different styles of theater, different styles of room configurations, so that, for instance, directors and performers could learn about what it's like to perform theater in the round, or to perform in the thrust, or in an end stage configuration. So we really wanted flexibility here. But we also didn't want to keep it too tiny. So we did include a mezzanine space that has been really awesome to be able to keep our audience close. And a technical gallery above with a tension mesh grid. And part of our favorite part about this is that it makes all of our technical spaces accessible to all of our students. So unlike in the past where you've had to climb up ladders to get to, for instance, our load rail in our other theater, anyone can get to these spaces. You can teach a class on this grid and have wheelchair accessibility right up to the edge of the grid so that folks can actually watch what's happening in the class, which is really exciting. We're able to fit an entire class of students up on the grid safely and not have to worry about anyone stepping into a hole. And that's created some really cool opportunities for teaching and learning. But it also has all of this incredible flexibility for hanging a lighting fixture anywhere, hanging a speaker anywhere, hanging a projector anywhere in this grid. And then finally, we've gone up. We also got to talk about the cool basement. So we added a trapped section of the stage floor to allow us either to do trapped stage or to take out some of those platforms and use it as an orchestra pit. And not a lot of black boxes have orchestra pits, but this is something as a large musical theater program that was really important to us. So we really wanted to make this multi-purpose. And so all of those platforms are flexible. So that's what we're seeing underneath here. And I'm actually going to let Tony talk a little bit more about what's going on underneath in this trap room.
sure. This was definitely one of the fun parts of the design for us. So the floor, you can see these height adjustable platforms, which really form the core of the floor in the room when you look at it up top. With a hand drill, you can raise and lower these, and so we can set up the room, or they can set up the room pretty quickly from one configuration to another. You don't have to lift these or move them. They just go up and down in place. And then they're surrounded by a series of smaller platforms that can be removed and re-legged at different heights to give you the ability to go from a thrust to an arena to an end stage or to a runway stage, or I suspect to many different things in between that will be discovered by creative students and faculty over the years. So it's a hybrid situation where we've got the stage area at the end of the room, which can be trapped. You can pull these platforms you see that are sitting on these columns. You can create an orchestra pit. So many different things that can be done, and relatively efficiently without a huge amount of time involved. Been great to work with a group of people who knew that they wanted some flexibility, embraced the technical challenge of it, and I think are meeting it already, even under these strange circumstances that we find ourselves today.
And so really, we put all of this inside of a really heavy box, precast concrete. And that is helpful because it means it supports the full range of vocal support and also instrumental support. But it would be a little clattery or gymnasium-like if we left it alone at that. So you'll see that the walls themselves, the precast systems have a pattern imprinted on them in concrete, and that scatters sound in a nice way to be sure that the energy we hear in the room is really supportive. And again, those walls are kept in close because of our choices about seating layout. So it's a supportive environment that makes it really easy to reach the whole audience from the stage in whichever direction you're having to perform. So Carson?
Yeah, I mean, this is you could look at this space, as a very functional space, but also sort of a raw space aesthetically, but it really isn't. We wanted to bring in some shapes. You can see some playfulness in terms of the interior design of the space. We didn't want it to completely be a sort of a black box, if you will. And then we incorporated some of the geometry of the acoustical shaping of the room that Scott mentioned. We're always trying to figure out a way to make Scott's stuff look better. It's a big challenge, but we work really hard at it. But not a high design space, but a space that does have a sense of wow factor to the students and ultimately to the folks that are coming to see the performances in these spaces.
If I can just jump in, mention real quick that where this theater is located in the building is quite deliberate. I mean, it's surrounded by studios and offices and the lobby, which both, I think, for Scott's preference, isolated it acoustically from some of those spaces. But we were able to then provide entrances and exits in each corner of the room and multiple ends of the room for performers primarily to pop in from unexpected places. If you're going to rearrange the room, the typical entrance next to the dressing rooms doesn't always work. So there's circulation all the way around 360 degrees around this room so that performers can appear and disappear as a director might dream up.
Well, and one last thing I want to point out, since you're looking at kind of the naked theater here, this is not how it would typically look. Obviously, we'd fill it in with scenery and drapes. But as you look towards what would typically be the stage, you're going to notice the big loading doors. And that was really important to us. We didn't put a scenic studio in this space. And that's because our scenic studio and prop studio were our newest construction before this building. And they are actually perfectly adequate as they were, but are located just across the street. And we actually saw that as an advantage, as students will have to learn how to pack a truck full of scenery and load that into a loading door. But we've also never had a theater with a loading dock, with a proper loading dock. And so it was really exciting to us to have a space that is accessible by truck with an ergonomic loading door and the ability to load scenery directly into the back of this space.
And safely.
And safely, yes. All right, let's go talk about kind of the outside of this building and the spaces that we've been able to build connection and community. So as we think about the outside of this space, we put this building right in the heart of campus. We really wanted this to be a place to build community for our students, something that they perhaps didn't have as much when we were scattered across 12 different buildings. So we really wanted this to be a community space for those students. And we did that partially with placement and accessibility. So you'll see, again, our lovely third floor dance studio that goes over the quad. There's entrances at that level underneath, including entrances that head towards that roadhouse or towards our art department or towards our scenic studio. And then on the other side, we've got this beautiful pedestrian bridge, which allows students to enter from the south side of campus. So you can enter on 2 different floors and into a variety of different spaces within the building.
Yeah, it was really important to the design team to make sure that this building fit into its context in terms of its pedestrian flow and the student experience, as well as the architectural context. And so we actually, as I said earlier, we pulled the building away from what is an existing hill that is there to allow for all 4 sides of the building to have its own wonderful sort of exposure and presence. And this image actually shows the wonderful loading dock. This building doesn't have a back side. So again, the challenge was from a design perspective, how do we make it look beautiful and function in that way? And I think that we were able to accomplish that. As Tony said earlier, we did intentionally bury the theater into the massing of the building because typically sometimes those theaters can stick out like a sore thumb, if you will, on the architectural building. And so we felt like it was really important for us to make that sort of live in a good spot relative to how the entire building is shaped. And also we want to create a dynamic building, to be honest with you. The idea that this particular program was hidden throughout the campus, but it still pursued tremendous excellence. We want to make sure that this building, as a design intent, really amplified the excellence that is happening for these students. And so, we want to create a wow factor, and I think it was really important to be for the college and the university and for the students to have a great place to go and learn their craft.
So as we flip through some of these exteriors, I also want to point out that we also made a point of creating smaller, less formal performance spaces for our students. Obviously, we have an incredible main stage season that's supported by lighting, sound, costumes, scenery, but we also have a lot of student groups creating new work. We have an improv troupe, we have a sketch comedy group, we have a hip hop dance group and a burlesque dance group, and they want to be doing work in a variety of different spaces. So we've included a small terrace theater on the south side of the building, which has some tiered seating and really allows for some of those cool, smaller, less formal performances. And you can also see, again, this is the view of the patio underneath that third floor dance studio. We've actually already used this as a performance space when we were attempting earlier this fall to do an outdoor performance with a completely socially distanced audience. This really became the perfect space for that, as it faces right out onto that large grass quad. So we were able to put our audiences out on the quad and our performers in this patio space, and it actually worked really lovely to create some live theater performance even in the midst of this pandemic.
So we want to talk about the other areas of the building, which is the lobby space and the collaboration spaces, the places that create this idea of connection and community. And that was really important to the design team as well, to create these multifunctional spaces. This is actually the lobby, the main lobby for the theater, but it also acts as the living room of the building. So this is where the students are are certainly welcome to enjoy the wonderful soft furniture, to collaborate with each other, both for the introvert and the extrovert. They can find a place to hide if they want to do that. There are lots of inside outside spaces, so they can move from one space to the other. And so we're very intentional about creating spaces outside of the classroom, if you will, or outside the lab, where students could collaborate and really appreciate what this program is really about.
And you'll see we've created those collaboration spaces in a variety of different styles. So you will see kind of traditional table and chairs for students to sit down and study at. And those tend to be next to large monitors that they can then use as digital monitors for their work. But then there's also a variety of different soft seating for kind of hangout space. And this cool learning stairs that actually also has charging stations in each chair. Up on the third floor, we also have some more soft seating specifically placed right outside the dance studios, so that as students want to sit and stretch before their dance classes, they have spaces to be able to do that.
And for those of you with sharp eyes might have noticed the lobby also has some light pipes for mounting stage lights on and connectivity to control them. So this space can be retrofitted into a performance space or adapted into one, as I'm sure it will be over time. And I think there's plenty of AV connectivity here too, Scott, if I'm not mistaken.
You are correct. Yeah. And even speakers built into that pretty wall. But is that, Carson, is that your next?
Yeah. So, I mean, we tried to incorporate those functional elements into some design features. So you see this wall. That is actually a wall that Scott helped us design relative to acoustical responsiveness, if you will. And so there are speakers that are hidden in there. We wanted to make sure that this space had a certain feel to it, if you will. But it also functioned as well as many of the other spaces as do in the entire building. So that wraps our 4 categories that we wanted to discuss today. Literally, this building has been, in the making for a long time, and I think you can hear from Mary's passion, and certainly from our team's passion, that it was really important for us to create a building where learning happened everywhere, where creativity occurred wherever it needed to occur, and there was a place for everyone to sort of explore, for students to explore, frankly, to explore their craft and to learn and fail at times. Actually, to this idea of being able to experiment was really, really important for us. And then again, it's the idea that this building is just a tool for students to explore their curriculum and become whatever they desire to be in terms of theater arts.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Again, I just want to reiterate on behalf of our entire team what a joy it is to be able to share this work with you. And we hope that you have found some tidbits in here that you can implement into your programs moving forward. If you have any questions that you would like to see addressed, not as a part of this format, we're going to send a link out to this webpage that gives a quick email link to each of the subject matter experts here that I'm sure that they would be glad to talk some more about it if anyone is interested. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.